exciting and a great opportunity to reach other cultures and other dynamics. The school that I work at is predominantly Mormon. So a lot of these kids, they're white and they don't know, they live a very sheltered life. So for me to inject and want them to learn those things as well has been a blessing, because a lot of the parents, they're like, we just love you. And every year, without fail, I have most of the staff students. I usually have maybe 1/3 of my class are staff students, because they're like, we know that Lori's a great teacher. She's going to be transparent and she's going to give them life skills as well as teaching them.
Which is something a lot of schools are lacking in
Mm-hmm.
their education system. Those
Yes.
life
Yes.
skills. That's great because
Yes.
you always, I mean, I know growing up, I went to Catholic school in Philadelphia, but it was
Oh,
more,
you were in Philly.
yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
love
I'm
that city.
born and
That
raised
was
in
there
Philly.
two summers ago.
Oh, nice. And I just remember growing up, getting older, and you get wiser when you get older and you catch
Mm-hmm.
on to more things. You're like, oh, this is not at all what they taught in the history books.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what, they always say the winners write the history.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't taught that, that shocking, the Jim Crow era was
Mm-hmm.
not in our face the way you find out when you get older.
Right.
So
Well,
just,
the history now, I mean, the history that we've been taught year after year after year is the Disneyland history. It's not the real history.
yeah.
So, and I always tell my students, and our school focuses on Christopher Columbus, like really hardcore. And I teach it because that's my job. I'm required to teach it. But I always leave my students with a question. And I always ask them this every single year. How can you discover a place where people already existed there? And they go, what? I'm like, I want you to think about that. How can you discover a place where people already lived? People were already here. And they leave like puzzled, and then I know that their wheels are spinning. They're thinking, what? They go home, they research, and they always come back and say, oh, you know what, I get it now, the natives were here first. So how did he discover it? I'm like, he didn't. I
Yeah,
just want you to know.
exactly. It's wild because up until I was maybe early 20s, I didn't even realize that Christopher Columbus really landed in the Caribbean first.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
me, I'm Puerto Rican, so
Mm-hmm.
looking at my Puerto Rican ancestry and just the Greater Antilles where he
Mm-hmm.
was, just the amount of death that followed is,
Oh yeah, it was tragic. It was awful.
and to this day people still don't understand.
No, they don't, because they have no idea. That's why I love teaching the Haitian Revolution as well. And I had a
Yes.
Haitian kid in my class. He had just moved to the States. He didn't even speak English. But when we got to that lesson, he was so excited about it. And so I taught it, but I also let him share to these kids who are sheltered that didn't know. I let him share his experiences. And I think, and the kids loved him, so he has that connection with those kids forever.
Hmm.
So it's very important to definitely share that. And I will say, I also teach, because we start teaching history. Where did we start? Oh, I have to remember. Well, we start African kingdoms and we go all the way to the Industrial Revolution. So that one is a good one too. Towards the end, the Industrial Revolution, when you start these millionaires, the guy that started the railroad, him, all these people. And so one time a student asked me, he said, well, Miss Holloman, they talk about all the men. What about the females? So I said, well, let me just break it down to you. The first female African American millionaire, she was the first woman, but she happens to look like me. And her name is Madam C.J. Walker. So I
Yep.
told them all about the hair products, and they were just like, well, how come this? They questioned, how come this is not in the book? So, well, people don't want to put it in the book. And
It's
they
a
were like,
tough
how do you know?
question.
Yeah. And they said,
Yeah.
well, how do you know? I said, well, I know because I'm very fortunate that I know my own culture. I said, but these are facts that you can look up. And so the next day I actually printed out a copy, just some background information about her, and pass it around. And here's the thing, I inject it into the lessons. It may take 5-10 minutes that I inject different things, but it's very important to share that with students so they know.
And them asking, yeah, and them asking this questions like, whoa, like you pique their interest because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that it's not in the book, but you're
Mm-hmm.
telling me. So wait a minute, and like you said, like those 5 to 10 minutes can make a world of difference.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, because the style that I teach, I'm not that teacher, and I'm sure you can attest to this because I've had those teachers, be quiet, don't ask questions. I'm teaching right now. Ah. Well, I'm opposite. If people have bubbles going off, or if I even see a kid and I'm thinking, you have a question, what is it? Let's talk about it. And we just put it out there. And sometimes I go off on a tangent a little bit, but I always bring it back. But it's just good for kids. They should be learning, and that's learning. That's the process. What am I thinking, and why am I thinking that? Let's talk about it.
Yeah. And since it is Black History Month, as I said before, I've been trying to get somebody with life experiences and somebody who's really interested in Black history to speak on the podcast about that exact topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how we progressed, how far we've come, how far we still have to go.
Yes.
What to you does Black History Month mean?
Well, I think that it was amazing that it was created because at first it was Negro Week, and then it spun into the month. I know me growing up, I grew up in Chicago, and I went to Catholic school as well. I went to an all Black Catholic school. So Black History Month was a huge thing for us at our school, and I loved it. So it's always important and special to me, and I think that is very important to teach in all schools, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. I actually private tutor Asian student. He's from China. He's been here in the States maybe I think this is his third year. And I had him watch My Friend Martin a couple of weeks ago. He didn't know who Martin Luther King was. And
Wow.
this is a kid coming from a whole different culture. So when he watched the movie, My Friend Martin, and you can find that on YouTube, it's free. He didn't understand why the white kids were treating the Black kids so mean. And I'm like, but he said, so you were here and white people were here. I'm like, yeah, that's how it was. I said, in some cases it's still going today, just so you know.
Yeah.
So
It's funny that you mentioned that because I forget, it's been a long time since I've seen this, but it was like a sci-fi comedy, kind of like grown up rated R kind of comedy. And it was a white guy and an alien. And this alien had come from the future. And I even Google it and I can't find it, but I vividly remember, and only this one scene, I don't really remember anything else about the movie. But they're smoking weed, and the white guy's like, "Man, I can't wait till we get as advanced as you." And this is not verbatim, obviously. This is just the synopsis of what they were talking about. And the alien laughs, and he goes, "That'll never happen." He says, "Why?" He says, "Because you guys literally go to war for the pigment of the outer organ of your." He was basically saying your skin complexion.
mm-hmm.
He's like, "You guys can't even get along because of the color of somebody's skin. What makes you think you're going to
Right.
advance to light speed and all these things?" And I was just like, it was a comedy overall, but also like,
It
wow,
was
that,
deep.
yeah.
It was making a statement. Well, we have to find out the name of that movie because I need to watch that. That
Yeah.
was pretty good. Well, I will say that I have a nephew that is, he's like really hardcore into looking up our family tree and our culture, not through like the DNA type stuff. He's not doing that. He's actually found that he said, well, Auntie, do you realize that he said, I don't think that we're from Africa. He said, I don't think that our family is from there. And I said, well, why do you think that? He said, well, look at us. We don't look like people from Africa. He said, I'm going to start doing some research. So he's actually found some historical research from our family background. He said, back then, I forgot who the guy was, but he said that back then on birth certificates, they would put everybody was classified as white or native. And then somebody that managed something in the government decided, no, we need to put Negro on the birth certificates or we need to put colored or black, or, different. First it was this, and then it was this. And so he's been going back looking up birth records, and he actually found, because I think in the 1800s, it was, when was it Cleveland? I think Cleveland was the
President.
president. And so they had ended up giving natives like 39 acres of land or something like that. But my nephew actually found some documentation that we have some land in Mississippi, and that's where my grandparents are from. That's where they're from. So when he showed me the document, I'm like, well, it says Sam Smith, because that was my grandfather's name, which is very generic. It wasn't Samuel, wasn't Sam Smith. It was Sam Smith. So that's very generic. Well, he was junior and his dad was Sam Smith. So we found some research on that, which is crazy. So we're in the process of looking this information up right now. But people definitely need to, don't rely on those companies to look up your ancestry. You got to
23andMe
go.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to go back and look and talk to your family members or your ancestors. And I think that's why it's very important to write down information about your family tree. And my niece Kira, that referred me to you, she has been looking up some family tree information as well. Well, I have a lot of the information that my brothers didn't have, and they're much older than me. But I remember as a kid sitting down talking to my grandmother and writing down names and dates and information. And I have all of that information. So now I'm able to pass that to my nieces and nephews who want to do this research, which obviously they're doing, and they're getting a lot of traction on it. So it's very important to know your history for sure.
Yeah, I got into that as well, but I did the 23andMe thing. But my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother, she had just passed away this last summer.
Oh,
But I
I'm
had got
sorry.
no, thank you. But I had actually got some information from her because she was
Mm-hmm.
actually really sharp towards the end, and she
Mm-hmm.
remembered her grandmother, which was her great grandmother and where they're from. So like my mom's side, a lot of them span from like Spain, from
Mm-hmm.
the Canary Islands in Spain, and
Wow.
and then on my dad's side, he comes from Puerto Rico. They're all Puerto Rican, but his part of the family is like very dark skinned, and they have like those Afro Latino features.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't tell me anything about his
His
ancestors or anything
background.
like that. But I know I have cousins in St. Thomas, so like it's a lot of the Caribbean, but and on top of that, my knowledge of learning that Christopher Columbus went to the
The
Caribbean,
Caribbean
and then
first.
the slave trade came through the Caribbean. At
Mm-hmm.
one point, I think when I was reading about it, it was like Puerto Rico's population was 80% African. So it's like people like to dismiss that African heritage or that African part of their bloodline, but that's definitely where a lot of our culture comes from. The Santeria and just the dancing alone. Just
Mm-hmm.
food, all of that, and language. So it's just really interesting when you dig a little deeper into history that it's not just one way or the other. It's a mixture thing. It's a mixture of a
It
whole
sure
bunch of things,
is.
and especially in
Yeah.
America, as a
Mm-hmm.
as a melting pot.
You should check out, I have to get the name, but it was a documentary, because I love documentaries. I watch those all the time. But it was one that I watched. It was about what was it said, the tale of two countries or something like that. But it was talking about Haiti and Dominican Republic. And it was saying how the people in Dominican Republic felt that they were better than the people from Haiti. So it was very interesting to me, especially because I actually go to a Dominican salon to get my hair done. And it's hilarious because the people speak to me and my daughter in Spanish. We're like, we don't speak Spanish. We don't know any Spanish.
They're black, and they refuse.
Yes.
They refuse it. I'm
They
not
look
black.
like
I'm Dominican.
us.
I was like, bro, you're black. I have Dominican friends. They're more Afro Latino than like my father's side. Like,
Right. And so but it's hilarious though when you think about it, because we're all connected. And it's so sad that in America though, we still have this diversity that comes up in some areas of America. And then we have people who are adverse to it in America. And that's this crazy thing. We're all together. just if you really get down to it. But I was reading an article and somebody said until American or the Americans, until they admit to fault, and I think it was Sir Richard Branson, actually, he said if people in America would actually admit